Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Building a Community to Tackle Cloud Object Storage Incompatibilities, brought to you by the SNIA Cloud Storage Technology Initiative, CSTI. This is a roundtable panel report on the recent SNIA Cloud Object Storage Plugfest held at the September SDC 24 conference. Okay, I'm going to advance the slide there. As one of the organizations within SNIA, the CSTI is dedicated to cloud storage education and promotion of technologies like AI at the edge, storage security and management, as well as driving understanding, collaboration, and standardization among industry-leading stakeholders. The CSTI welcomes more contributors to join the open forum momentum we are building. Very quickly, let's take a look at the SNIA legal notice. This provides SNIA's copyright terms regarding use of the material. There are no warranties expressed or implied, so if you want to reference this material, please do so at your own risk. You can download a copy of this presentation using the interface for this live webinar. The interface also lets you to submit questions during the talk and rate this presentation at the conclusion. We really appreciate your questions and feedback. Now let's welcome our esteemed panel of presenters. This is Michael Hord. I'm chair for the SNIA CSTI. And welcoming Gautam from Dell.
Hello, good day.
Awesome. And Brandon from Google.
Hey, excited to be here.
Alan from Hammerspace.
Thank you, Michael. Good to be here.
Thank you. Adam and Frank from IBM.
Thanks for having us.
Sam from Vast Data.
Great to be here.
And Rick from Versity Software.
Delighted to be here as well.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. Let's move to the agenda. And so most of the time we'll focus on sharing perspectives and Q&A. We will have one audience poll question in the middle, and I'll summarize a few points now and also at the end. The CSTI organized and sponsored the recent Cloud Object Storage Plugfest. This slide describes who we are, how we are organized, and a summary of our goals. It's important to note how unique this group is. There's no other place in the industry that brings together the expertise, multi-vendor test forum, and mission to enhance interoperability. The entire motivation is to improve customer experience before they find issues. Here's a technical view, how we work and what we explored. The whole point of gathering multi-vendor client and server products is to test a variety of code which was developed independently using separate implementation assumptions and approaches. In this case, for cloud storage, there's no independent, well-defined ISO standard, and until recently, there was no multi-vendor community hosted by a neutral third party. Therefore, what exists today are very good and well-developed APIs with many options, but there is no detailed set of validated profiles that spell out specific behavioral characteristics required to attain interoperability. Where we have seen issues is different vendors select different options, yet there are no defining method to attain a common accepted set for different usage. Our forum is prepared to address this. The same issue applies to access control, feature deprecation, and error handling. We believe development of commonly available open source test suites and tools can help this. This slide answers why we conducted the Plugfest and what's the value. A Plugfest is an open forum multi-vendor gathering hosted by a neutral third party with all interoperability tests conducted under NDA to ensure focus is on engineer-to-engineer collaboration. Engineers create the test plan on site using a whiteboard, and they decide among themselves what to test. Since all tests are under NDA, progress is shared among engineers in the room who do the work. So eventually this information gets published in white papers and other formats. However, the primary point is, if you do not have a seat at the table, you are missing out. Note, all storage networking protocols require face-to-face interoperability testings to thrive. And here's a few examples. SAS and SCSI matured in SNIA Plugfest. SMB3 depended on SDC Plugfest. NFS thrived due to Connectathon and Bakeathon Plugfest. Open forum groups and their interoperability Plugfests have always generated test tools as part of their work. This is no different. This is how we intend to empower enhanced compatibility across the industry. So we welcome your team to get on board. Participation in the Plugfest event is open to SNIA and non-SNIA members. And we welcome more companies to join SNIA CSTI to help lead all the necessary planning, organization, and standardization efforts. And so now with that, let's hear from our experts. So Gautam, please take it away.
Thank you, Michael. Happy to be here and share our Dell's perspective on the event. Dell had two teams, storage teams participating in the Plugfest, PowerScale and ECS. Both have different object implementations. And for both of our teams, it was a very positive experience participating in the Plugfest. This offers the opportunity for us to work with the community and understand from the interactions, the expectations, and the behaviors of these of the protocol. There was what we observed was there were several server vendors like ourselves, and there were some clients, but we would definitely benefit from participation of more clients and more application use cases. The interaction in the room was very productive, and to Michael's point earlier, the fact that we were there face to face, it helped resolve some questions and behavioral differences very quickly. And in terms of what we observed or what we got, it did validate our internal testing, our internal observations, but we would, to the point of future opportunity for this Plugfest, we would welcome additional client engagement and move this in a direction where we can arrive at a common test suite, so it can lead to standardization of expected behaviors for the protocol.
Awesome.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gautam. Thank you. Okay, Brandon.
Yeah, so Google brought two services to the SNIA Plugfest. The first one, Google Cloud Storage, is a cloud object storage service. It speaks a variety of protocols, and we were excited to sort of see how various clients would interact with it and identify any issues. And the second service is Google's Storage Transfer Service, a tool for moving data between various cloud object services. So being able to test that against a variety of different providers was really valuable to us. We identified a handful of issues, some of which we knew about, some of which were new, for both cloud storage and storage transfer, which was really valuable. So we greatly appreciated being able to directly work with teams, see which test suites they use, try things out, and get an idea for prioritization of various parts of compatibility work. I want to reiterate how great it would be to have additional clients, especially just because we're there with services, and the more clients that we can provide to to test is great. Being able to just directly solve problems. So so conversations with the engineers of the other companies really helped us sort of validate sort of some things we previously knew, and learn that there's definitely more ambiguity in the APIs than even that we knew about. So it was generally a great experience.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Alan.
Thank you. I thought I might focus more on the perspective of what you get out of the Plugfests and some of the historical stuff. I'll start with the diagram. I'm not going to focus on the product, but I wanted to put this diagram in to illustrate how important S3 is to our product. We have clients on the outside talking S3 to the product. The product uses S3 internally to replicate between clusters, and we use S3 to archive and retrieve things from cloud. So all across our product, S3 is just like extremely important. And to that end, especially since we talk to and from cloud and talk to and from clients, we need really good interoperability. And just to give you a perspective, I think I've attended almost every Plugfest, SMB Plugfest when I started back in 2000. Microsoft really wasn't engaged, but over the years they became extremely enthusiastic about the Plugfest and became one of the major contributors and one of the main attenders of all the Plugfests for many years. So I think historically we can see that having Plugfests encourages the major players to get involved and participate. So the other thing I really appreciate about the Plugfests is you focus almost entirely on interoperability and you don't really care about the product. You're not talking about features to other people. You're talking about the protocol and whether or not it's working. And I really appreciate the NDA perspective, because I think it's great that you can have these open conversations without any concerns at all of people using information if you find problems. I've never heard of people using the fact that they found problems in any form of business opportunity. And I think that's really good, and I really appreciate that. Obviously, I think Michael referred to this earlier. The earlier we can identify interoperability issues, like if you have a backup product that's trying to back up via S3 as a client, we really need to know if we can work with that client seamlessly. So these interoperability issues, flagging them, eliminating them, it really helps customers in the end, because they can be confident they can deploy these solutions together and not have problems. Another thing I really appreciate is, the fact you have all this expertise in the room and you can exchange knowledge. And it's amazing how just talking to other people, you get these perspectives that you never considered. And I did want to comment that everybody else's perspective is wrong, and mine is the only one that matters. But it's nice to have other perspectives. And then, of course, testing diversity. You get you get people testing the protocol in a way that you never considered, and I think that's just really advantageous to building a robust product. In terms of what I would like to see going forward, I'm looking at the top right. One of the problems with S3, I think, is that it has no versioning. And it's one of the few protocols I've ever seen that doesn't have versioning. So the reason versioning is important is you want to be able to define the expectation you get from a version of the protocol. So if somebody adds a new feature, you would like the version to change so that you can respond and indicate that you don't support features beyond a specific version. And I think for me, that would be one of the main things I'd like to see introduced into S3. Like other people are probably going to tell you, having more test suites, more clients, more well-defined test cases would be great. And again, going back to the versioning, you can use these test suites to identify incompatibilities and regressions through the use of versioning. If you try to do something that's not supported in a version or should have been supported in a version, you can identify that with the product test cases. I think that's it, Michael. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Awesome. And thank you for the humor. We always enjoy your sense of humor. That's awesome. Thank you.
No problem.
Awesome. Okay, Alan, or Adam and Frank.
Yeah, thanks. First, I wanted to recognize the fact that although Frank and I were there from the IBM Cloud Object Storage team, Matt Benjamin was also there from the Ceph team and participated, but he unfortunately couldn't make the call today. In general, I think that for us, we hadn't participated in SNIA or SDC in a while, and so it was a good opportunity to get back in. It set kind of the foundation for who's interested in dealing with S3 protocol interoperability and directions in moving towards a standard for S3. It was also wanted to reiterate the multiple perspectives is very useful for us. SCC and the Plugfest itself offer something that isn't really available for cloud providers, as there's not really a dedicated convention space where you can have developer-focused conversations with other people that are, experiencing the same type of struggle. Some things that we'd like to see in the future would be more diversity in terms of ISVs, open source, or just regular clients participating. Since SNIA is more focused towards providers, this is something that we're going to have to focus on to get a large, cover the footprint of what customers actually see and use when interacting with an object store. And yeah, the in-depth conversations, since it's under NDA, are very useful, because oftentimes you may talk to somebody who actually worked on the product at Amazon or at another group that may have encountered the same kind of struggles that you had. And overall, this is kind of the direction that we'd like to see. We're going to further participate in future Plugfest, because we really want to eliminate customer headaches when dealing with S3-based object stores. Oftentimes, customers don't even know what's going on in the background. They may be using a data science application or something for AI, and they just plug in their AWS credentials and expect it to work the same way. And we found that, although it may be seen as a universal standard, but implementations and expectations differ. Thanks.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. And then Sam.
Yeah, so this is the first time we actually participated with SNIA, and so we have new expectations. So one of the things we definitely benefit from joining this Plugfest is the ability to talk to other vendors and other clients and how they use their use cases. So we definitely need to expose a different perspective on use cases. VAS itself is not just a storage for S3, but we also do SMB and NFS, and we do multi-protocol support with all three protocols. So we definitely have exposure from other perspective from clients. So that was great. We definitely want to see a bit more participation from the client side. We have one or two clients that participate. We definitely want to see more, maybe end user application vendors or some different scope. From a service perspective, it was great because we were able to establish communication with other companies as developers. So we don't actually have to go through a support organization. We can directly talk to developers and identify interrupt discussions, new feature discussions. So that was great from a VAS perspective. And we're definitely able to have that back-end communication with engineering. So it's just direct engineering to engineering without marketing involvement, without support engagement or sales engagement. So this is very beneficial for VAST, and definitely want to participate in future Plugfests. Great.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Rick.
Yeah, it's always hard to be the last one to come because all of my colleagues have so many great points. But I will, hammer home on some of the things that we found most critical. First of all, it was a great event. I've been part of Plugfest and NFS testing and fiber channel testing as part of engineering for years. And it's really the price you have to pay to be able to play in an ecosystem, a mature ecosystem. It's not a one and done. It's a continual effort because everything's always changing. Our product, we're actually a provider as we let people use S3 to bring data into our managed archives that we take care of. And we're also a client of all these upstream providers if we're helping you move your data into an archive of one of the cloud providers. So for us, I would say the biggest takeaway I would have for people who might be on the client side here, might be a customer side, talk to providers. This is a chance to contribute tests and use cases or write them directly, contribute them directly to this effort. And then you have all these people in all these storage companies around the world working to solve your problem. Your test case can be a gating item to them having a good week or not, or having a really rough week because you give them a really hard challenge. So I think that test case is really interesting. And we're going to be looking at building up the collection of tests that we have. And those test cases, I think, should be open source. And hopefully we'll gather some of this together and make it a publicly accessible thing that everyone will be able to do. So that's pretty much my point of view on this stuff. So.
All right. Well, thank you, Rick, and thank you to everyone with perspective. So right now, we'd like to take a brief moment and conduct the audience poll question. And this is a yes or no. And just really quick, we did the same question last January, and we had some really good input. So let's see, I think the poll question is starting. It takes about 1 minute. And you should be able to see progress on your screen for the results coming in. So if you could please respond to the question, that would be awesome. And I'm starting to see, let's see. Okay, so yeah, I'm seeing polls. Folks are answering there. There's a few more. And we'll just take it'll be another 30 seconds or so, I would estimate. And let's see. And then among our presenters, are there any other comments overall that, based on other people's feedback, if you had any other points that you wanted to make? And let's see. We're looking for, and for the audience, please enter your questions into the chat. And we're looking forward to that. Okay, the poll has ended. So I think we can move to the next slide. And this brings us to the Q&A session. And so, okay, here we go. So we've got our presenters. Gautam was not able to get his video working, but that's him right there. And we just want to get into the Q&A. So let's start with just the first question is, please provide examples how end customers may be impacted due to unsupported API calls and unexpected behavior. And is there anything that end users should be looking out for?
Sure, I think I could take a crack at that one.
Yep.
I think there are many different ways that interoperability issues are introduced and can impact user experience. New features and functionality is one. Third-party implementations are always a bit behind. And from an application developer's perspective, it's not always obvious what features are new. And seemingly basic functionality can break CRUDs and other essentials such as request signing. One example of this is additional checksum feature, which is fairly recent. This is one of the more friendly examples because the breakage is obvious. If you send a request trying to use something, it'll return a 500 error. But there's also other examples that can be even more annoying when things break in non-obvious ways. And we've seen this kind of thing happen when third-party implementations ignore unrecognized HTTP request headers. One recent example of this was conditional writes, where an accidental overwrite is not prevented and the user's just completely oblivious. So, this is a difficult one to tackle. One thing you could do is maybe try to check when features that you're going to use in your application were introduced, and look at how flexible the application you're using is. Can you configure around these sort of features, or try to bake some of that flexibility into your own application if you're developing one? So.
Can I just comment that that's one of the reasons I think versioning is so important, is when you get things like new headers, new checksums, you should be able to look at the version of a protocol and identify whether or not it's expected to have that feature. You can mandate certain features in certain versions of the protocol. So I think that's one of the ways you can address some of these unexpected behavior things. If you're not conformant with the version of the protocol, then that's a problem.
Okay. Anyone else on that one? Okay.
I'll make a quick comment, right? I mean, agree with everything that's been said, but maybe this is an obvious statement, but I'll still make it, right? Not all server vendors support the same level of compatibility, right? And so, you might be expecting something to be compatible, but it may not just be supported. And so just trying to get a baseline of what the level of support is and how to talk about it might also evolve from this effort, right?
And Gautam, I think you're pointing out the lack of having that industry accepted set of options, that it's really up to the developer to choose that independently. And that's somewhat of our issue, that there's not a organizing kind of method to get on the same page. And I remember hearing that quite often during the Plugfest. So,
yeah, I mean, I can take a stab at that. I mean, this is one of the reasons we also want a interrupt testing suite managed by the Plugfest or whoever contributes, that, hey, everyone has this feature sets that we add and contribute to, and then everyone can go and test and validate whether it's a client, application, or vendor, and then whether we can validate whether it is a pass or fail, and then we actually know where the gaps are in the product, and then have some kind of a supportability matrix coming out of that.
Awesome. Okay, awesome. Thank you. And so the next question is, my organization mandates seamless data portability between cloud instances. What do I need to do to make sure I am not locked into one solution? And I know this touchy subject, everybody is aware of the tension there, but any thoughts to help our audience or the end customers how to do
so
it?
this is a big deal for Hammerspace. One of the things we're trying to do in the NFS world is drive everything we do into the NFS standards. So we participate heavily in the NFS 4.2 standard and definition. It would be great if we could do the same thing with S3, but it does require participation from everyone. I mean, fundamentally, this is the effort we're trying to pursue here. We're trying to achieve interoperability, and the better we, the more we succeed, the better it will be to solve this particular problem. It should not be a barrier between clouds or between even products. The protocol itself should not be a barrier. You may offer features, you may offer customizations, but if you adhere to the core standard, then you should be able to move data around between any product and any cloud.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I think that from our perspective as a cloud provider, we value portability just as much as anyone else, since you may be driving it from different implementations within the same company, on-prem to cloud, or migrating from some people get sick of one provider and they want to move to another, and that's somebody's loss and somebody's gain. And those aren't, people don't make those decisions lightly, and they are, in object storage is like the foundation of most cloud implementations, along with compute and like IAM. So these are, it's a big deal for us to be able to move, from our own stuff, from on-prem and from other cloud providers or to other cloud providers, to maintain a good experience for all customers.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think right now without a standard or some formal definition of anything, you basically want to try and keep things as simple as possible. The more features you use and rely on in your application, the better chance you have for incompatibility issue down the line.
Yeah, and I would just throw out, you as a customer should be encouraging and requiring your vendors to take part in things like our Plugfest, right? To make sure that they've gone through the efforts and hard work of testing against each other.
Awesome. Okay, and then let's see. This is a little detail. I'll just read it out. Even if AWS never support this, would we be able to have a feature probe so we could look for conditional overwrite, range get, etc.? Here, it just moved a bit. That way our code could look to see if a feature like conditional overwrite was present before relying on it for work. So I think that's a discovery issue of capability. And please, any thoughts?
So I think that like this was somewhat referenced with the versioning the API, and that would be something more akin to like a stated standard or releases or levels of compatibility. Something that we could do, as a community without any sort of formal standard, and the test suites could implement this kind of levels of compatibility. But I do think that it would ultimately be a good idea to have discoverability of the API's capabilities built into it. A challenge for us is often if we were to strike out and do this on our own, like from like an IBM perspective, the problem is, well, then what happens when AWS does this on their own, and then we have to re-implement it. So this is like a primary reason why we've come together to discuss these things, because if we decided as a group, and you have Google and Microsoft and IBM and every other provider on-prem and cloud decide to implement this API, that somewhat tips the balance of power back into the customer's favor, and so everybody has a better experience.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think the NFS community has done very well on this with the Connectathon test suite, where you can claim adherence to their test, the parameters of their tests, and you can be sure that if you pass the Connectathon test suite, your NFS client or server should be compliant and interoperable with the other implementations. I think if we had a test suite like that, you would not need to worry about probing a product, because you could simply run the test suite against the product, and if it conforms, then you have confidence that it's going to behave the way you think it's going to behave. SMB does this very well. SMB is kind of an evolutionary protocol, but they have this thing called dialects. And for each dialect, you have a set of APIs and behaviors that you expect. So I think whether we do it through versioning, or we do it through dialects, or we do it with test suite conformance, the outcome is you should be confident that if you deploy a product, a client, a server, it should be compatible with something else that's also compliant with that product test suite, or
Awesome.
that protocol test suite.
Yeah, and I think in our discussions, we had a birds of a feather session on the Tuesday night of the 3 days, and that was really an open forum to get advice and best practice, insight on what we should do. One of the discussion points was the possibility to create profiles, which go into very specific sets of usage, and then with the different protocol elements that are required for that profile, and actually get into, you know, having requirements that say you know, this profile shall require XYZ, and then that can of course be versioned, and then, you know, stepwise incrementing, you know, over time. So so whether it's a backup or something of that nature, you could get very precise in terms of what's needed, and then of course that gets baked into a test suite, and it should be fairly automated to do this type of testing very rapidly. Well, let's see. We had a question. Amazon and Microsoft are notable missing in this webinar. Do they plan to join this effort in the future? And so Microsoft did attend the 3 days of Plugfest. They had a whole team. They did not bring a product that was tested at that time, but they were contributing to the discussion. You know, folks, literally, I was so impressed that all the folks on this call here, their teams were sitting at that table for the majority of the time for 3 days. And the Microsoft group was part of that. And that was really just sharing insight, you know, where there are trouble spots. Folks generally knew pretty much right away what to be looking for. And so it was a very rapid pace of, hey, let's test these areas. And sure enough, those were, you know, the ones to spend the investment and time on. And so Microsoft is definitely part of this. For AWS, they have been invited, and we're continuing to welcome them. And so we're encouraging, you know, encouraging them to join. And that's a dialogue right now, so I can't speak for them. And as far as projecting when we will have standardization, I think it's, you know, there's no way for anyone to predict, you know, timeline on that. I think it's more of an exploration and a dialogue, and it's mostly how can we help benefit customers. That's really the bottom line. If it's not doing that, then, you know, it's not meeting the goal. So I think it's a dialogue. Now, we did have other folks. Let's see, one fellow from NetApp caught COVID, so he wasn't able to you know, travel, but he was able to do some testing. So we do have an outreach going on right now, and I'm you know, setting up meetings. We're starting to broaden. Even right now, we're adding more product teams to the test matrix for April that's coming up. So so that was that question. Let's see, there's quite a few. Okay, ultimately, doesn't AWS dictate S3? If a consortium of vendors represented here added extensions to the API or new capabilities, self-describing API, wouldn't this break things? Assuming AWS is the genesis of S3 API going forward, will it always be downstream from AWS? So the question is pretty lengthy. If people could look at the question in that, hit the little icon that has the question mark. It's a little long, and but I think it's addressing how do we work with AWS. Go ahead,
Michael. I think historically we can look back at Microsoft and SMB when we started in the late 90s with SNIA. Microsoft owned the client, they owned the server, they owned the protocol. They dictated what happened, you know, the requests, the parameters, and everything else. And what we saw was an evolution where Microsoft recognize the fact that there are other major vendors in the NAS industry that support SMB, and they have to work together. And it wasn't, it didn't take a huge amount of pressure. I think Microsoft, I suspect this is why Microsoft is more engaged with S3 in the cloud initiative, because they have history here where they recognize that they cannot simply ignore the rest of the industry when it came to the SMB protocol. They are very engaging. They actually started, I think, around 2005-ish. They started inviting NAS vendors to their headquarters to participate in Plugfests on their site, because they recognized the need to be interoperable with many of the different vendors. I suspect the same thing will happen with AWS, because it doesn't make sense to create an island for yourself when there are other major vendors out there. I just think it's a matter of time that they will recognize the benefits of working with the community.
Yeah, no, I'll add a couple of thoughts there as well. I think from a business point of view, and I'm not speaking for Amazon, but having been parts of large storage companies in my past, even if you're dominant in a marketplace, you have to interoperate with others. And if somebody else innovates in one direction and you suddenly have a premier offering that now isn't as high featured or high performance as somebody else, it's bad for you. So I think there is an incentive for people like the AWS team to take part in this and make sure that people can move into AWS from other products, and that they stay competitive with other things and other neat ideas other people come up with.
Yeah, I think I wanted to comment, because I talked about this significant amount. As a personal experience developing against S3 for more than a decade and implementing our own version, sometimes you will, be forced by customers to potentially beat AWS to market in one way or the other, and that's a risk that we all take as vendors, and oftentimes it does lead to headaches. If you have a customer that really wants some feature and you implement it and they adopt and put their data in and rely on it, and then AWS comes out with their own version, nobody wins. So building that relationship with AWS is a key component. This is not a hostile space towards AWS. In fact, it's the opposite. We want them to participate. We want this to be good for customers. We want this to be good for open source. So many open source clients and other projects that are completely unrelated to storage rely on S3 APIs, and so it's a key component. And we all benefit when we all participate in this kind of effort. So it is an elephant in the room. We don't want to ignore it, but we also want to invite with open arms to participate. We can do, with all the people and all the stakeholders at the table, we can do whatever we want. This is fundamentally a people problem, and just getting that organizational momentum to stop living on our own little islands and come together and make something happen.
Awesome. Yeah, and to answer the beginning of that question, absolutely, AWS owns the IP, the direction control of S3. That's their product, and there is no way that a third party can, dictate anything with regard to standardization. So it's literally a dialogue to collaborate and to find win-win areas that we can, achieve some progress together. And so really what we're looking at is the fact that the Plugfest is kind of the starter for any of these protocol developments. And so that's where we're starting. And the notion of building up, say, profiles or something like that, that really is something that if we sit down at the table with the group that we have here and more folks that are coming, that we feel that we can get the right recipe. And and that's again to arrive at some of the customer benefits and that. So we're not trying to dictate anything or guess or project that, oh, we're gonna do certain things. All of this is a dialogue and a collaboration. So thank you. Okay, so we have some more questions. This feels completely relevant for SNIA. If anyone is going to make it happen, things like this and SNIA seem like the natural space for this collaboration, including AWS and Microsoft. I think that's more of a comment, and it comes from, it looks like a open source person. Okay, so another question is, instead of relying on the vendors to self-validate compatibility, would it be a reasonable goal for SNIA to have a standardized community validation test suite to give clear indication to clients of what compatibility limitations there are for each server implementation that can be used by the client to validate their product? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's a stated goal. And I think that a key component of that is, we talked about this on previous calls and in person. We want this to be an independently developed, purpose-built thing. Ceph has a very nice suite for validation, but it's targeted towards Ceph and its abilities. And we would like to have that kind of thing be independent, owned by SNIA, open source. And I think the big part of that is recognizing what the foundations are. And so by getting more clients and ISVs and open source participation, where we can analyze what requests happen and how they interact with storage, then we can build that focused set of tests for the broadest spectrum of customers, and then move to more focused APIs download. So since we're all live in, the business world and resources are limited, and we all have to focus on this as we can, we want to make really targeted and focused choices to, doing these things and forwarding the interoperability test suite. And participation in upcoming Plugfest will drive that significantly, I think.
Awesome.
Yeah, I was going to answer it more simply than Adam. I was just going to say yes.
Okay. Well, that's unusual to have such a
I gotta sound smart, okay?
I think the words were good. No, I agree completely with Adam, and I wanted to concur with his previous comment as well. This whole thing is not a competitive space. The protocol is not a competition. The protocol is a channel, and it doesn't make sense that we treat it as anything other than just an open communication channel.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to mention, thank you both, that Adam, I think your comment was really talking about the independence of SNIA and the neutral party level that we bring, and that's very much needed. And so we do host and bring this together. We facilitate that. But the bottom line is, SNIA is not going to pick a standard or pick a like a protocol. Literally, it's up to the industry to come together and collaborate, but also provide the input for such a standard. So we're not trying to presuppose ahead of time, what is that standard? There are many standards out there, but obviously I think people on this call and with the Plugfest, a lot of the focus has been on S3, but there are other cloud object storage protocols. So for SNIA, we're open to have that dialogue and have the exploration to identify the opportunities where folks, for example, anyone on this call, or Amazon or others, it really requires, if they're willing to come to the table and work with us. and then we can bring the right level of interoperability or standardization. And so I'm going to be writing a white paper on that topic pretty soon. So I think this topic we will definitely cover on another call next year as we welcome more people. We have an outreach going on with backup and archive vendors to get more clients there. We've talked about the open source ISV folks, but then obviously the questions here are asking about Microsoft and AWS. So it's our hope and intent to broaden the list of folks that are attending, and we're not presupposing any outcome. So we're looking forward to a dynamic discussion. Anyone else on that one?
Just to comment again, I think Adam touched on this, but the fact that we have or we're working towards an independent sanctioned conformance on the protocol, I think benefits customers. They want the confidence to know that no vendor is taking opportunities and building a private test suite. I think having SNIA do the coordination and sanction it is really important.
Great, thank you. Let's do one quick question, and it looks like the last one that we have for now. Our configurations integrate numerous open on-prem cloud-enabled storage instances, including backup and archive. How can compatibility testing help resolve stability, consistency, and complexity issues?
Well, I think the one thing it can do is ensure some basic level of support before you put it in front of an end user.
Okay.
It would also allow you to identify compatibility issues in a timely manner, instead of being surprised when it's too late. So.
Yeah, and I recall some of the discussion. It's just time to market, but it's also once the customer is engaged, expectations are set, and there's a timeline to get things working. And so it's really kind of a raw deal where the customer has expectations, the development teams and even the product might be arriving, and that clock is ticking. So there's cost and just getting everything to work. And Alan, I think you talked quite a bit about multi-protocol end-to-end, that it's not necessarily just a simple, point A to B. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I almost said when you asked the question, I almost said, well, other than complexity, everything else is by definition.
Mm-hmm.
You can certainly ease the customers. If you're doing a POC with a customer, a proof of concept, you're trying to validate your product. The fact that once we have a conformance test suite, you've gotten across a lot of hurdles just by saying, I can do all these things and I guarantee I'm compliant with all these things. And if you test the client and server and they both conform, you can have a high confidence they're going to work well together. On the complexity issue, that's really down to the people on this call and everyone else in the industry to make it simple. That's more of a product thing that you want to try and simplify the use cases for your product. But in terms of conformance and interoperability, I think the test suites, they go a long way to making that much more simple.
And I was just going to add, I mean, as a purchaser, if you control a budget and you're spending money with any of us who provide you a service, you should be asking, how do you, as part of my puzzle, as part of my solution, how do you provide an interoperable service with all these other parts and providers? And before you buy, you should be looking at somebody who has taken part in this kind of interoperability testing. That has a huge amount of power.
Awesome. I'm seeing we're getting close to the end. I do have a few comments at the end. Thank you so much for this roundtable and the Q&A session. Let's see if we could go to the slides again. That would be awesome. And okay, so going forward, here are the broader set of goals for this initiative. We intend to expand the Plugfest test matrix in 2025, and at the same time, broaden dialogue to explore more formal definition in industry base level interoperability, as well as create open source test suites and test tools. Additionally, we will organize how we structure broad industry collaboration, availability of testable technical documentation, and assess opportunities for standardization. Now, those elements right there are really dependent on having some of the very large industry contributors to work with us in a collaborative manner. So, and we've discussed that just now. So we intend to work in that area, but it really is dependent on getting a favorable collaboration. And so all of this starts in January, and so we need participation from developers, architects, strategists, product managers to help define how we can best help your product team. Again, we welcome more companies to join SNIA CSTI to help lead all of the necessary planning, organization, and standardization efforts. And to join the team, please contact us at askcloudplugfest@snia.org. And I'm wrapping up now. So additionally, we welcome your team to join us in Denver, Colorado for April 25 SNIA CSTI Plugfest. The participation in the Plugfest event is open to SNIA and non-SNIA members. We believe the best investment for your cloud object storage product team can make that you can make is to join the community network and work side by side with experts to resolve issues ASAP before customers find them. If you are not there, you are missing out on community-driven solutions moving ahead. And then last slide. Finally, I'd like to thank all of our roundtable panelists for their incredible insight, contribution while at the Plugfest in September and presenting during this webinar. Thank you also to the audience for attending, and please rate this webinar. Your input is valuable and important for us to improve our content. You can also download this presentation using the interface on the webinar today. And please look out for our Q&A blog that we're going to develop and publish on SNIA, as well as follow us on Twitter. And thanks to all. Have a fantastic day. Thank you. Bye-bye.